Okay, so in this video, what I want to quickly do is take a look at the two assignments that you were given from yesterday and hopefully some of the things that you might have been able to see and find as far as sound devices go. So let's start with one of the greatest bands ever invented, ever created, ever walked the face of the earth, my good friends One Direction, and of course one of the greatest songs ever written, personal favorite of mine, Story of My Life. So hopefully as you were going through and looking at this yesterday, you were able to see right off the bat that this is a song full of sound devices. What I've done is gone ahead and labeled some of them for you and shown you sort of what I saw and what I found as I was looking through these. Now, there's many more that I've not listed, but you can see overall how this works. So, yes, even Harry and Niall and Liam and Louis and Zane, that traitor, all of them are very aware of sound devices in their work, and they're using them. So great artists are doing that. So you can see at the top, we have things like assonance with the letter A being repeated. We have slant end rhyme with words like bones and stone. We have perfect end rhyme with words like tonight and tight. We have slant end rhyme with words like hope and home. Can't and change would be internal rhyme, change and cage, slant end rhyme. And then we also see things that are being repeated, phrases like written in these walls or the story of my life. These are all things that are called parallel structure. So what you'll see is obviously that these artists are very aware of sound devices, and these were just some of the sound devices that were discussed in the PowerPoint that I was able to find in this song. So again, great band, great song, and a great example of sound device. The second thing we gave you then was the poem My Papa's Waltz by Theodore Rothke. Very famous poem for a lot of reasons. It's famous for its possible double meaning, and it's really famous for its use of sound device, and in particular rhythm and meter, which I'm going to show you really next because I think it's pretty cool. So when I go through a poem, one of the very first things I'll look at is, number one, is does it rhyme? And if it does, is there a scheme to it? So as I went through and looked at this poem, I identified that right away it had a rhyme scheme of A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, H, G, H. So very similar to the Shakespearean sonnet, Rothke is using a rhyme scheme. What I also noticed about the rhyme scheme is every 4 lines it changed. So Rothke is also using not only a rhyme scheme, he's also using quatrains. So this is actually a 16-line, 4-quatrain poem. Okay, so once I'd established the rhyme and the rhyme scheme, I was able to break down the form and structure by looking at the number of lines, and that was 4. I also then noticed, as I went through kind of line by line here, that this is full of sound devices. I see things like right away, the double L and the double Z in the words small and dizzy. That's an example of consonants, right? I also looked at words. I also looked at words like waltzing, was, and we, and whiskey, and noticed that the W at the beginning of these words was repeating. That's an example of alliteration. Words like mother's countenance, not unfrown, could not unfrown. Those we see the O repeating. That's an example of assonance. The double T in battered, the C, the K, and the L in the word knuckle and buckle. That's an example of consonants. The A in palm, caked, hard. That's an example of assonance. So throughout this poem, Rothke is using sound devices, expertly, right? Looking at the rhymes, we have perfect end rhyme with breath and death. Dizzy and easy is a slant end rhyme. We have perfect rhyme with buckle and knuckle. So he's really incorporating many of the sound devices that were discussed in our PowerPoint. Probably the only one we don't see here is we don't see a lot of repetition. We don't see a lot of parallel structure. Okay. So again, obviously, a poet like Rothke is very aware of the sound that the poem is making. Okay. What is the real genius, I think, of this poem, though, has to do with this word waltz. Okay. What is this poem about, right? Is this a poem about a father coming home after having a drink after work? Him and his son are messing around and having a dance, what they call a dance, where they're sort of romping and playing and they're knocking things over. Mom's not too happy, or is this something a little bit darker? Is this something about child abuse? Because we see things like battered knuckles and right ear scraping and beating and hanging on like death. So the one thing about this poem is that this could have multiple meanings. Many people argue that this is just a sort of playful, wistful moment between a father and his son, where they're kind of like roughhousing around the house. And then others suggest that it could be a little bit more sinister. The dad might be drunk. He might be an abusive alcoholic father. The mom doesn't really know what to do because she herself has probably been beaten. So she's just kind of standing by watching her son being abused. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. But the true beauty of this has to do with the word waltz. Now, waltz in this poem is a metaphor for the behavior between the father and the son, whether it's a playful roughhousing time or whether it's violent. The waltz is metaphorical for that. If we know anything about a waltz, for those of us who have either seen a waltz or actually maybe even danced a waltz ourselves, what we know is that a waltz is a very slow, methodical, organized, elegant dance. It's not a free-for-all. It's not the floss. It's something that's very sophisticated. There are steps to it. There are parts that your partner plays, and there are parts that you play. If one of you messes up, the dance doesn't work. If we've ever danced the waltz or we've ever seen the waltz, we know that the waltz has a rhythm to it, sort of like a beat in our head that we have to keep in mind as we dance it. And the rhythm is sort of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's kind of like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a very organized, very patterned. It doesn't seem anything like this. This seems like a free-for-all, right? The romping and the playing and possibly the abuse. But what's really cool about this is that Rothke pays attention to the rhythm of the waltz by paying attention to the rhythm of his poem and the meter of his poem. And what he's done is he's actually broken this down into what we call a 3/4 meter rhythm. So as you go through and we look at, again, this is another way to analyze poetry, and we look at the lines of verse, we'll see that line 1 has 6 syllables, line 2 has 7, line 3 has 6, and line 4 has 7. So we see a 6-7-6-7 pattern. Okay, and again, the way he's doing it is he's breaking down the lines into 3 syllables at a time. So for example, in line 1, the whiskey, that's 3. On your breath, that's 3. Then we go to line 2, could make a, that's 3. And then small boy dizzy is 4. So he's actually mimicking the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4 rhythm of a waltz with the rhythm of his poem. So it's a 3-3, 3-4, 3-3, 3-4 kind of rhythm and meter, which is absolutely genius. Okay, what we'll see after the first 4 lines, the first quatrain, is now all of a sudden, though, the syllable count changes, right? So it's no longer 6-7-6-7, but it's 6-6-6-6. And we'll notice that this is the only time it happens in the poem. So right away, this tells us this could be important. So kind of going back to the waltz, what we see is that the dance is wrong. The steps are wrong. The people that are doing it are dancing it wrong. And we see here in the poem, this is where they're romping, they're knocking things over. Mom's standing around, she's not very happy. This could be the part of the poem where the dance between the dance, I put it in quotes, the dance between the boy and the father get violent. It gets violent. Okay. Then we go back to our 6-7-6-7, right? With our next lines 9, 10, 11, and 12. And the dance kind of gets back to normalcy, and then it ends with 6-7-6-6. So again, we see the syllable count has changed in the last 2 lines. Then waltzed me off to bed, still clinging to your shirt. Rothke wants us to pay attention to that, those 2 lines. So is this a scene where the boy doesn't want to let go of his father because they're having so much fun come bedtime? Or is this a scene where the father is waltzing him, beating him into his bedroom, and the boy is trying to fight back? So again, the real genius of My Papa's Waltz is this rhythm meter that Rothke plays around with that actually mimics the rhythm of the dance, the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is just another way to take a look at poems. You can take a look at sound devices. You can take a look at rhythm and meter. You can take a look at rhyme scheme. So don't forget to keep that in mind as you're doing your responses for your own anthology. Really enjoy this poem. Lots of good stuff in here about what it means, and then also its form and structure, and also the sound devices that are being used. Just a reminder, since we have talked about this poem, you cannot include it in your anthology. But again, I hope you enjoyed it. It's a very deep poem with a lot of possible meanings.